Sometimes in life, we build something we love only to watch it crumble before our eyes. The pain of losing what we've spent years creating can feel like losing a part of ourselves. Marcus Sterling faced his empty office, knowing tomorrow would be his last day as CEO of TechNova Solutions. 30 years of work destroyed by one scandal. His investors had fled. His employees were gone. The dream was over. He was packing his final box when security called. A homeless man had entered the lobby and was demanding to see him. The guards wanted to remove him, but something in the man's eyes made Marcus curious. "Send him up," Marcus said. The elevator doors opened, and out stepped a man in torn clothes with wild gray hair. He walked straight to Marcus's whiteboard and began writing complex code. "I know how to save your company," the stranger said. "What?" "If the person you least expected held the key to everything you thought you'd lost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Marcus Sterling had once believed in the power of dreams made real. The framed photograph sitting on his desk, now packed in bubble wrap at the bottom of a cardboard box, captured that younger version of himself. 28 years old, standing in a cramped garage with 3 other engineers, all of them grinning like they'd just discovered fire. The sign behind them read, "TechNova Solutions," in hand-painted letters. Crooked but full of hope. That garage in Palo Alto had been their world headquarters. 4 folding tables, a coffee maker that gave everyone heartburn, and computers they'd built from spare parts. Marcus remembered the smell of solder and the sound of keyboards clicking late into the night. They'd been building something that would change the world, software platform that could predict market trends with uncanny accuracy. Not through guesswork or luck, but through pure mathematical brilliance. The early years had been a blur of 18-hour days and ramen dinners. Marcus threw everything he had into TechNova. His savings, his relationships, his health. His girlfriend left him after 6 months. His parents stopped calling after a year of missed dinners and broken promises. But the work, the beautiful, impossible work, kept him going. By 35, he was worth $50 million. TechNova had moved from the garage to a gleaming campus in Silicon Valley. The company employed over 2,000 people and managed investment portfolios worth billions. The young man in the photograph would have been amazed by the marble lobbies, the executive dining room, the private jet that whisked Marcus between board meetings in New York and product launches in Tokyo. But somewhere along the way, the dream had changed. The algorithms that once predicted market trends began predicting human behavior. The software that helped honest investors make smart choices started helping less honest people manipulate markets. Marcus told himself it was evolution. Business was about adaptation, about staying ahead of the competition. If they didn't push boundaries, someone else would. Sarah Chun had been his conscience during those years, though he hadn't recognized it at the time. His executive assistant had started as an intern 15 years ago, fresh out of Stanford with a computer science degree and an unshakable moral compass. She was the one who asked uncomfortable questions during strategy meetings. "Are we sure this is ethical?" She would say, her voice quiet but persistent. "What happens to the pension funds that lose money when our clients profit from this information?" Marcus had learned to navigate around her concerns. Sarah was brilliant at her job. She could organize his calendar, manage crisis communications, and translate technical jargon for board members with equal skill. But she was naive about business realities. Competition was fierce. Regulatory oversight was minimal. Everyone was pushing ethical boundaries. TechNova just did it more elegantly than most. The real change had begun 5 years ago, when Robert Hayes joined as Chief Technology Officer. Robert was everything Marcus thought he needed: ruthless, brilliant, and completely focused on profits. He'd come from a prestigious consulting firm with a reputation for turning around struggling companies. His methods were aggressive, but they worked. Under Robert's guidance, TechNova's revenue tripled. Stock prices soared. Marcus found himself on magazine covers, speaking at conferences about disruptive innovation and ethical capitalism. He should have paid more attention to how Robert achieved those results. The data breach happened 6 months ago, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Marcus was reviewing quarterly projections when Sarah burst into his office without knocking something she'd never done in 15 years. "We have a problem," she said, her face pale. "Someone accessed our main servers. Customer data, financial records, proprietary algorithms, everything." The next few hours were a nightmare of conference calls with lawyers, emergency board meetings, and crisis management consultants. The breach was massive personal information for over 10 million clients, including social security numbers, bank account details, and private communications. But worse than the hack itself was how it had happened. The investigation revealed systematic security failures that went back years, passwords stored in plain text, encryption protocols that were outdated by a decade, backup systems that hadn't been tested since the Obama administration. It was the kind of negligence that didn't happen by accident. When the congressional subpoenas arrived, Marcus realized how deep the hole went. Robert Hayes had been cutting security costs for years, redirecting that money to more profitable ventures. When Marcus confronted him, Robert's response was chilling in its casualness. "You think Microsoft doesn't have security gaps? Apple? Google? Everyone does. The difference is we were unlucky enough to get caught." "This isn't about getting caught," Marcus had said. "This is about people's lives, their privacy, their trust." Robert laughed, actually laughed. "Trust? Marcus, our clients don't trust us. They use us because we make them money. They'll be back once this blows over." That conversation happened 3 months ago. Robert was wrong about the clients coming back. The exodus started immediately and accelerated with each new revelation. Pension funds, investment banks, hedge funds, everyone who'd built their strategies around TechNova's algorithms pulled out. The stock price collapsed from $97 per share to less than $3. The personal cost was even steeper. Marcus's ex-wife, Jennifer, stopped letting him see their children. "I don't want them associated with this scandal," she'd said during their last phone call. "Figure out your life, then call me." His oldest daughter, Emma, a sophomore at Northwestern, changed her major from computer science to environmental studies. "I don't want to work in tech anymore," she texted him. "It's too corrupt." The health problems started soon after. Chest pains that sent into the emergency room twice, only to be told it was stress-related. Insomnia that had him pacing his apartment at 3 in the morning, replaying every decision that led to this moment. His doctor prescribed sleeping pills, anxiety medication, and a sabbatical. "You need to step away from work," Dr. Morrison had said. "Your body is shutting down." But there was no stepping away. Every day brought new lawsuits, new investigations, new revelations about TechNova's practices. The Securities and Exchange Commission was building a case. The Federal Trade Commission was considering charges. Congressional hearings were scheduled for next month. Marcus's lawyers, he now had 6 of them, delivered increasingly grim assessments of his legal exposure. "The best-case scenario is civil penalties in the hundreds of millions," his lead attorney had explained last week. "Worst case, you're looking at criminal charges for conspiracy and securities fraud." Through it all, Sarah remained loyal. She could have left months ago. Her skill set would make her valuable to any tech company in Silicon Valley. Instead, she stayed, working for a fraction of her usual salary, helping Marcus navigate the daily crises that threatened to sink what remained of TechNova. "Why do you stay?" he asked her one evening as they worked through another stack of legal Documents. Sarah looked up from her laptop, her expression thoughtful. Because I remember why we started this company. You may have lost sight of it, but I haven't. TechNova was supposed to help people make better financial decisions. It was supposed to level the playing field, give ordinary investors the same tools as Wall Street firms. That was a good dream, Marcus. Maybe it's not too late to find our way back to it. But as Marcus stood in his empty office on this Tuesday evening, packing the last remnants of 30 years into cardboard boxes, Sarah's optimism felt naive. The dream was over. Tomorrow, he would lock the doors, turn off the lights, and become another cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. He was wrapping the garage photograph in tissue paper when his phone buzzed. Sarah's voice came through the speaker, tense and confused. Marcus, there's a situation in the lobby. A homeless man somehow got past security. He's demanding to see you. The guards want to call the police, but he keeps saying he knows how to save the company. He seems... She paused, searching for the right word. Lucid. Determined. Should I have them remove him? Marcus looked around his bare office, empty bookshelves, disconnected monitors, boxes stacked like a fortress around his desk. What did he have to lose at this point? His reputation was destroyed. His company was bankrupt. His family wouldn't speak to him. Perhaps there was some cosmic justice in ending this chapter of his life by humoring a madman. Send him up, Marcus said. The elevator's soft chime announced the arrival of Thomas Mitchell, though Marcus wouldn't learn his name for several more minutes. The man who stepped out wore clothes that had seen too many seasons, a threadbare jacket held together with duct tape, boots with holes that let in rain and snow, pants that had faded from black to gray through countless washings in public restrooms. His hair was long and unkempt, streaked with premature silver, and his beard needed trimming. But his eyes were alert, intelligent, and utterly focused. Without introducing himself, without asking permission, the stranger walked directly to Marcus's whiteboard. He picked up a dry erase marker and began writing. Not words, but code. Complex, elegant lines of programming that seemed to flow from his mind to the board without hesitation. Marcus watched, fascinated despite himself. The code was sophisticated, more sophisticated than anything his current development team had produced in months. It appeared to be a security protocol, but unlike any he'd seen before. The algorithms were innovative, the architecture was brilliant, and the implementation was flawless. This is impossible, Marcus said. The man paused in his writing, turning to face Marcus for the first time. What's impossible? The code, or the fact that I know it? Both. No one has access to our internal systems anymore. We've been offline. For weeks, and even when we were operational, only 5 people in the company understood our core architecture well enough to write something like this. The stranger smiled, not the wild grin Marcus expected from a madman, but the patient, knowing smile of a teacher watching a student work through a difficult problem. 6 people, he said quietly. There were 6 people who understood your architecture. You forgot about me. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Who are you? My name is Thomas Mitchell. Tom, to people who knew me back when I was worth knowing. I helped design the original TechNova algorithms. I wrote the first version of your predictive modeling software. I built the foundation that everything else was constructed on. Tom capped the marker and set it down carefully. And I know exactly how to save your company. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus studied Tom's face, searching for signs of delusion or deception. Instead, he found something that had been missing from his life for months: certainty. This man, whoever he was, believed completely in what he was saying. Assuming that's true, Marcus said carefully, why would you want to help me? Why would? You want to help TechNova? Tom walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Because I know what it's like to lose everything you've built. I know what it feels like when people you trusted destroy your life's work. And I know that sometimes the only way to save something you love is to start over from the ground up." He turned back to Marcus, and in that moment, something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding that transcended their obvious differences. "I also know," Tom continued, "that you didn't do this alone. Someone helped you dig this hole. Someone with access to your systems, your data, your trust. Someone who knew exactly how to sabotage your company while making it look like incompetence rather than malice." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. How could you possibly know that? Tom smiled again, but this time there was no warmth in it. "Because the same person who destroyed TechNova destroyed my life 15 years ago. His name is Robert Hayes, and he's very, very good at making people trust him right up until the moment he ruins them." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sank into his desk chair, trying to process what Tom was telling him. "You knew Robert 15 years ago? I was his business partner. We had a software consulting firm, nothing as grand as TechNova. But we were doing well. Government contracts, corporate clients, steady growth. Robert handled business development while I focused on technical innovation. I trusted him completely." Tom's voice grew quiet. "That trust cost me everything." Marcus looked at the code on the whiteboard, then back at Tom. "If you're telling the truth, if you really knew Robert, if you really helped design our systems, then you must know it's too late. The company is finished. Tomorrow, I'm shutting down operations permanently." "Tomorrow," Tom said, "you're going to give me 24 hours to prove that everything you think you know about this situation is wrong." The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching Marcus's mood as he returned to the office he thought he'd never see again. Tom was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the server room like a monk in meditation. Surrounding him were computer components that Marcus didn't remember approving for purchase: hard drives, processors, cables, and circuit boards arranged with the precision of a surgeon's tools. "Where did all this come from?" Marcus asked. Tom looked up from a motherboard he was examining. "Dumpsters, mostly. Amazing what people throw away. Half of this equipment just needed cleaning and minor repairs." He held up a processor. "This chip was in the trash behind a startup that went bankrupt last month. They probably paid $12,000 for it 6 months ago." Marcus watched as Tom connected cables with practiced efficiency. Despite living on the streets, the man's technical skills appeared sharp. His movements were confident, purposeful, betraying years of experience with complex systems. "Tell me about Robert Hayes," Marcus said. Tom's hands paused for a moment, then resumed their work. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How you met him, how he destroyed you, how you ended up." Marcus gestured vaguely at Tom's appearance. "How? I ended up homeless?" Tom finished. "That's a longer story than we have time for. But the relevant parts start 15 years ago, when I was stupid enough to believe that business partnerships were built on trust and shared values." Tom connected a final cable and powered up his improvised workstation. The monitors flickered to life, displaying streams of code that scrolled by too quickly for Marcus to follow. "I was living in Seattle then," Tom continued, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. "Had a small consulting firm called Mitchell Systems. We specialized in financial software risk assessment, fraud detection, market analysis. Nothing revolutionary, but solid, honest work. I was making enough to support my wife and daughter, maybe take a vacation once a year." The pain in Tom's voice was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus had heard that same tone from other men who'd lost families, the carefully controlled grief of someone who'd learned not to examine wounds too closely. Robert approached me at a tech conference in 2009. He was working for a big consulting firm then, McKinsey or Bain or one of those places. Very polished, very persuasive. He'd seen my presentation on predictive algorithms and wanted to discuss a partnership. Tom pulled up a series of financial charts on his monitor: stock prices, trading volumes, currency fluctuations. But these weren't current data. The timestamp showed information from 15 years ago. His proposal was simple. My firm would handle technical development. His firm would provide business development and client management. We'd split profits 50-50. It seemed reasonable. I was better with code than with customers, and Robert had connections I could never access on my own. What went wrong? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Everything, eventually. But it started small. Robert would suggest modifications to our algorithms, nothing major, just small tweaks to improve performance. The changes always made sense in isolation. A parameter adjustment here, a weighting modification there. I was focused on the technical elegance of the solutions, not their real-world implications. Tom highlighted a section of code on his screen. To Marcus, it looked innocuous. A few lines of mathematical formulas embedded in thousands of others. This little function, Tom said, pointing to the highlighted section, was Robert's idea. He called it an optimization subroutine. It was supposed to improve our fraud detection accuracy by analyzing transaction patterns in real time. But it didn't? Oh, it did exactly what it was designed to do. The problem was, it had a second function that I didn't discover until too late. While it was detecting potentially fraudulent transactions, it was also cataloging legitimate transactions that could be exploited. Personal spending patterns, investment habits, salary information, everything needed to manipulate someone's financial life. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. He was building profiles. Comprehensive psychological and financial profiles of everyone who used our software. Bank executives, pension fund managers, investment advisors, people with access to enormous amounts of capital and decision-making authority. Tom opened another window on his screen, displaying a network diagram that looked like a spider web of interconnected nodes. Each node represented a person or institution, linked by lines that showed relationships, dependencies, and influence patterns. By the time I realized what was happening, Robert had built a map of financial vulnerability across dozens of major institutions. He knew which bank president was having an affair, which pension fund manager was struggling with gambling debts, which regulatory official was worried about his daughter's medical bills. And he used that information to systematically manipulate market outcomes for his real clients. Not the ones we thought we were serving, but a shadow network of hedge funds and private equity firms that paid enormous fees for actionable intelligence about their competitors' weaknesses. Marcus sank into a chair, the implications washing over him. TechNova's algorithms, our predictive modeling systems. If Robert brought the same techniques to our company, he didn't just bring the same techniques, Tom interrupted. He perfected them. Your company gave him access to 10 times more data than I ever had, plus 15 years of additional experience in how to weaponize that information. Tom pulled up a new set of files, emails, financial records, system logs that Marcus recognized as TechNova internal documents. How do you have access to our servers? Marcus demanded. I never lost access, Tom said simply. Robert may have destroyed my company and my reputation, but he never found all the backdoors I built into the systems we developed together. When he joined TechNova, he brought my code with him, modified and expanded, but built on foundations I created. The screen filled with transaction logs showing patterns Marcus had never noticed: seemingly random data transfers, account access, attempts, system modifications that occurred during off hours when security monitoring was minimal. For 5 years, I've been watching Robert systematically compromise TechNova's integrity. The data breach wasn't a security failure, Marcus. It was the final stage of a carefully orchestrated plan to destroy your company while making it look like incompetence. But why? What does he gain from ruining TechNova? Tom smiled grimly. Check your stock price this morning. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his trading app. TechNova stock was trading at $2.73 per share, up from yesterday's close of $2.41. Someone is buying, Tom observed. Large blocks purchased through shell companies and offshore accounts. By my calculations, they've acquired approximately 37% of outstanding shares over the past 2 weeks. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. A hostile takeover. Not hostile, opportunistic. When the bankruptcy proceedings start next week, these mystery investors will emerge with a proposal to acquire TechNova's assets for pennies on the dollar. They'll claim they're saving the company, rescuing jobs, preserving shareholder value. The courts will approve the sale because it's better than total liquidation. And Robert will be positioned to lead the new company with complete control over all the algorithms, data profiles, and client relationships he spent 5 years building. Plus, he'll own the technology outright instead of being an employee. It's brilliant, really. Sociopathic, but brilliant. Marcus stood up, pacing the small server room. Even if everything you're saying is true, what can we do about it? The damage is done. Our reputation is destroyed. Our clients are gone. Our legal exposure is enormous. Tom saved his work and swiveled his chair to face Marcus directly. The damage can be undone if we can prove it was intentional sabotage rather than negligence. Your legal exposure disappears if you can show you were the victim of fraud rather than the perpetrator. Your clients will return if we can demonstrate that their data is now secure and that the people responsible have been held accountable. How? By doing exactly what Robert did to me 15 years ago, but in reverse. Instead of using technology to destroy someone's life, we use it to reveal the truth. Tom's fingers flew over the keyboard, opening new windows, executing commands, accessing systems that should have been beyond reach of his improvised workstation. I've been preparing for this confrontation for 15 years. Every transaction, every communication, every manipulation, I've documented it all. Robert thinks he's invisible, but he's been operating under my observation the entire time. The main monitor filled with a timeline that stretched back over a decade. It showed Robert's career progression, his client relationships, his financial transactions, and most damning of all, his communications with co-conspirators. This is evidence of a criminal conspiracy, Marcus said, scanning the information. It's more than that. It's a complete blueprint of how modern corporate sabotage works. Robert isn't acting alone. He's part of a network of consultants, investors, and executives who specialize in this kind of orchestrated destruction. They identify vulnerable companies, infiltrate their leadership, create conditions for failure, then profit from the collapse. Tom highlighted several names on the timeline. Marcus recognized some of them prominent business leaders, respected investors, people who'd appeared on magazine covers and business television shows. How many companies have they destroyed? At least 12 over the past decade. Always the same pattern. Bring in a charismatic executive with a track record of turning around struggling firms. Implement aggressive cost-cutting measures that secretly compromise security and operations. Then engineer a crisis that justifies selling the company to predetermined buyers. Marcus felt sick, and I just let it happen. I trusted him completely. You trusted him because he's very good at earning trust. That's his actual skill set, not technical expertise or business acumen, but psychological manipulation. He identifies what people want to hear and tells them exactly that. Tom pulled up Robert's personnel file from TechNova's HR system. The Photograph showed a confident, well-dressed man in his mid-40s with an easy smile and expensive haircut. But now Marcus could see something else in those eyes, a coldness that he'd missed during 5 years of working together. The question, now, Tom continued, is whether you're willing to fight back. What do you mean? I mean, we have approximately 16 hours before Robert's investors file their acquisition proposal with the bankruptcy court. Once that happens, the legal machinery starts moving, and it becomes much harder to stop. But if we can present evidence of fraud before then, we can request an emergency injunction to halt all proceedings. Marcus looked at the screens full of evidence, then at Tom's determined face. You really think we can save TechNova? I think we can do better than that. I think we can expose the entire network and prevent them from destroying other companies, the way they destroyed us. Tom stood up, his improvised workstation still humming with activity. But I need to know you're committed. This won't be easy. Robert and his associates have enormous resources and powerful connections. They'll fight back hard, and they'll try to discredit both of us. Are you ready for that kind of battle? Marcus thought about his children, who wouldn't speak to him, his ex-wife, who'd lost respect for him, his employees, who trusted him to protect their livelihoods, Sarah, who'd remained loyal despite having every reason to abandon ship. What do you need me to do? Tom smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him. First, we need to secure this evidence in multiple locations before Robert realizes what we're doing. Then we need to contact the FBI, the SEC, and the congressional investigators. And then, Tom paused dramatically. We need to call a press conference and tell the world exactly what happened to TechNova Solutions. And you think that will work? I think, Tom said, that the truth has a power that even Robert Hayes hasn't learned how to manipulate. Tom's notebook was a marvel of organized obsession. The cover was held together with electrical tape, and the pages were stained with coffee, rain, and what Marcus hoped was just dirt from years of street life. But inside, every page was filled with meticulous handwriting, technical diagrams, and financial calculations that would have impressed the most detail-oriented forensic accountant. I started keeping this the day Robert destroyed my first company, Tom explained, flipping through pages covered in dates, times, and transaction details. At first, it was just grief trying to make sense of what happened to me. But over time, it became something else, a map of how these people operate. Marcus watched Tom's weathered fingers trace columns of numbers. You've been tracking him for 15 years? Him and others like him. Once you understand the pattern, you start seeing it everywhere. Tom turned to a page filled with newspaper clippings, headlines about corporate bankruptcies, executive departures, and unexpected acquisitions. Dataflow Systems collapsed in 2011. Nexus Technologies sold for parts in 2013. Meridian Financial dissolved after a data breach in 2016. All of them followed the same trajectory as TechNova. All connected. To Robert, either Robert directly or people in his network. They rotate through different roles, sometimes the inside saboteur, sometimes the white knight investor, sometimes the crisis management consultant who helps restructure the failing company. Tom flipped to a section near the back of the notebook. These pages were different, filled not with historical data, but with technical specifications and code fragments. Marcus recognized some of it as TechNova's proprietary algorithms, but there were modifications he'd never seen before. What is all this? Insurance, Tom said. I knew that someday I'd have a chance to fight back, so I've been developing tools. Better security protocols, fraud detection systems, evidence preservation techniques. Everything will need to expose what Robert has been doing. Tom's makeshift workstation had grown overnight. Somehow, he'd acquired additional monitors, upgraded processors, and networking equipment that transformed the server room into something resembling mission control. Cables snaked across the floor in organized bundles, and the soft hum of cooling fans filled the air. "Where did you learn to do all this?" Marcus asked, gesturing at the sophisticated setup. "Necessity. When you're homeless, you become very good at making do with whatever resources you can find. Libraries have excellent internet access if you know how to blend in. Coffee shops will let you work for hours if you buy something occasionally. And people throw away perfectly good equipment all the time." Tom powered up the central console, and multiple screens came to life simultaneously. Each one displayed different aspects of TechNova's current situation: stock price fluctuations, legal filings, media coverage, and most importantly, the ongoing acquisition of shares by mysterious investors. "They've increased their position," Tom noted, highlighting the latest trading data. 42% as of market close yesterday. "They're moving faster than I expected. Is that bad?" "It means they're confident. The bankruptcy filing must be imminent, probably today or tomorrow. Once they control 51%, they can block any competing offers and ensure the acquisition goes through on their terms." Marcus studied the trading patterns Tom had highlighted. "These purchases, they're coordinated, aren't they? Multiple buyers acting in concert. Definitely. Shell companies, offshore funds, family trusts, all designed to hide the real purchasers. But if you know what to look for, the patterns are obvious." Tom opened a new window showing a network diagram similar to the one from yesterday, but expanded and more detailed. The web of connections now included dozens of entities, all linked through financial relationships, shared board members, and overlapping ownership structures. "This is bigger than just Robert," Marcus realized. "Much bigger. What we're looking at is essentially a private equity model applied to corporate destruction. Instead of building companies up and selling them, these people identify vulnerable targets, break them down systematically, then acquire the pieces at discount prices." The implications were staggering. Marcus sank into a chair, trying to process the scope of what Tom was showing him. How many people know about this? Very few. The victims usually don't realize what happened until it's too late. The perpetrators are careful to make it look like natural business failures. And the investigators, when there are any focus on the immediate causes rather than the larger patterns. Tom pulled up a series of financial statements from companies that had been destroyed over the past decade. At first glance, they all looked different. A biotech startup, a manufacturing firm, a regional bank. But Tom highlighted specific line items that revealed striking similarities. Same consulting fees paid to the same shell companies. Same legal firms handling the bankruptcies. Same investment groups swooping in with rescue offers. It's like a playbook being executed over and over again. But why hasn't anyone noticed? Because it's spread across multiple industries, multiple jurisdictions, multiple years. No single investigator has enough pieces to see the whole puzzle. And the profits are enormous. We're talking about billions of dollars in asset transfers. Tom's notebook contained page after page of calculations showing how much money the conspiracy had generated. Conservative estimates put the total value of destroyed companies at over $20 billion, with the perpetrators capturing perhaps 30% of that value through strategic acquisitions. TechNova is just the latest target, Marcus sighed. Actually, TechNova might be the final target. Your company's algorithms and client data represent the crown jewel of this entire operation. With TechNova's predictive capabilities, they can manipulate markets on a scale that makes their previous efforts look like practice runs. The thought was terrifying. Marcus had built TechNova to help individual investors make better decisions, to democratize access to sophisticated financial analysis. The idea that those same tools could be used to exploit vulnerable people was almost unbearable. We have to stop them. That's the plan. But first, we need to secure the evidence and establish credible backups. These people have significant resources, and they won't hesitate to use them. We need to assume they'll try to suppress or discredit anything we present. Tom began executing a series of commands that Marcus couldn't follow. Data streams flowed across multiple monitors as files were copied, encrypted, and distributed to secure servers around the world. I'm creating multiple redundant copies of everything, Tom explained. Different locations, different access methods, different encryption keys. Even if they manage to shut down some of our evidence, enough will survive to tell the story. While Tom worked, Marcus found himself studying the man more carefully. Despite his homeless appearance, Tom moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to complex technical challenges. His knowledge of financial systems was encyclopedic. His understanding of legal procedures was sophisticated, and his grasp of investigative techniques rivaled that of professional law enforcement. Tom, what did you do before you became a software consultant? Your background is not typical for someone in our industry. Tom paused in his typing, considering how much to reveal. Military, originally. Army intelligence, specialized in electronic surveillance and data analysis. Did 3 tours overseas before I got tired of the politics and decided to use my skills in the private sector. That explained a lot. The methodical approach to evidence gathering, the paranoid security measures, the ability to improvise sophisticated technical solutions with limited resources. It all reflected military training, applied to civilian problems. After I got out, I spent a few years working for various government contractors before starting Mitchell Systems. I thought the private sector would be cleaner, more straightforward. Turns out I was wrong about that. Tom resumed his work, but Marcus sensed there was more to the story. The transition from military intelligence to homeless street person wasn't something that happened overnight, and it wasn't something that happened just because of a failed business partnership. What happened to your family? Marcus asked gently. Tom's hands stilled on the keyboard. For a long moment, he stared at the screens without speaking. My wife was a nurse, he said finally. Emergency room at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. My daughter was 8 when Robert destroyed my company. After the business collapsed, I couldn't find work. Robert had made sure I was blacklisted throughout the industry. We went through our savings, then our retirement funds, then borrowed against the house. Tom opened his notebook to a page near the middle. Tucked between the financial calculations was a photograph, creased and faded, but carefully preserved. It showed a woman with kind eyes and a young girl with pigtails, both smiling at the camera. Lisa tried to hold things together while I fought to clear my name. She worked double shifts, picked up extra responsibilities, did everything she could to keep us afloat financially. But the stress, Tom's voice caught. She started making mistakes at work. Small things at first, but in an emergency room, small mistakes can have big consequences. Marcus waited, sensing that Tom needed to tell this story at his own pace. Patient died because Lisa administered the wrong medication. She was exhausted, distracted by worry about our situation, and she misread a prescription. The hospital conducted an investigation, found her at fault, and terminated her employment. The family sued for malpractice. Tom closed the notebook, but kept his fingers resting on the cover. The malpractice insurance covered the settlement, but Lisa couldn't get another nursing job. Word spreads fast in medical circles, and no hospital wanted to risk hiring someone with a patient death on their record. We lost the house 6 months later. What happened to your daughter? Custody went to Lisa's parents. They argued that we couldn't provide a stable home environment, and the judge agreed. I was allowed supervised visits twice a month, but Tom shrugged helplessly. What 8-year-old wants to spend her weekend with a father who lives in his car? The pieces of Tom's story were falling into place, painting a picture of systematic destruction that went far beyond simple business competition. Robert hadn't just bankrupted a company. He destroyed an entire family. Lisa blamed me for everything that happened, Tom continued. She was right to. If I hadn't trusted Robert, if I'd been more careful about the business partnership, if I'd recognized the warning signs earlier, she'd still be working as a nurse. Emma would still have her father, and none of this would have happened. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I was the technical expert. I should have understood what Robert was doing to our systems. I should have protected the people who depended on me. Tom turned back to his workstation, but Marcus could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly as he resumed typing. Is that why you've been living on the streets? Guilt? Partly, but also strategy. When you're homeless, you're invisible. People look through you, around you, but never at you. It's the perfect cover for surveillance work. I could follow Robert's associates, monitor their communications, document their activities, and no one would ever suspect that the crazy homeless guy was gathering intelligence. The revelation added another layer to Marcus's understanding of Tom's situation. This wasn't just a man who'd fallen on hard times. This was someone who'd made a conscious decision to sacrifice his comfort and dignity in service of a larger goal. For 15 years, the first few years were just survival. Learning how to live on the streets, how to find food and shelter, how to stay safe. But gradually, I started putting the pieces together. I realized that what happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. That's when I decided to fight back. Tom pulled up a series of surveillance photographs on his screen. The images were grainy, obviously taken with hidden cameras, but they showed Robert Hayes meeting with various individuals in restaurants, offices, and private clubs. I'd documented hundreds of meetings, thousands of communications, countless financial transactions. I know where Robert lives, where he vacations, who he talks to, what he eats for breakfast. I've become an expert on his entire network. That must have been incredibly difficult. It kept me alive, Tom said simply. Having a purpose, even one that seemed impossible, gave me a reason to get up each morning. And gradually, I realized I was building something valuable, a comprehensive case file that could bring down the entire operation. Marcus watched Tom work, marveling at the man's dedication. 15 years of homelessness, of isolation, of grinding. Poverty, all in service of gathering evidence against people who had destroyed his life. It was either noble or insane, and Marcus wasn't sure which. But why now? Why TechNova? You could have exposed Robert years ago. I tried. I contacted the FBI, the SEC, several journalists. But I was just a homeless man making wild accusations against respected business leaders. No one took me seriously. Tom opened a folder containing dozens of rejection letters, dismissive emails, and case-closed notifications from various law enforcement agencies. I realized I needed more than just evidence. I needed credibility. I needed someone on the inside who could corroborate my story and provide access to current data. Someone like me. Exactly. When I learned that Robert had joined TechNova, I knew it was my chance. Your company was high-profile enough that its destruction would attract attention. And you, Tom looked at Marcus directly, you still had enough integrity left to do the right thing when you learned the truth. The compliment caught Marcus off guard. He'd spent months thinking of himself as a failure, a man who'd compromised his principles and lost everything that mattered. The idea that someone saw integrity in him was almost difficult to process. I don't feel particularly integrous. I let Robert manipulate me for 5 years. I allowed TechNova to engage in practices that hurt innocent people. But you didn't know what Robert was really doing. And when you found out about the security breaches, you tried to fix them. When the investigation started, you cooperated fully instead of stonewalling. That's more integrity than most people in your position would have shown. Tom saved his work and turned to face Marcus fully. The question now is whether you're ready to take the next step. We have the evidence, we have a plan, and we have a narrow window of opportunity. But once we start this process, there's no going back. Robert and his associates will do everything they can to discredit us, intimidate us, and if necessary, destroy us. Marcus thought about his children, who might finally have a reason to be proud of their father. He thought about Sarah, whose loyalty deserved better than the collapse of everything she'd worked to build. He thought about the thousands of TechNova clients whose trust had been betrayed. What do you need me to do? The prototype device looked like something a teenager might build for a science fair. Circuit boards held together with zip ties, wires that seemed to go everywhere and nowhere, and a small screen that flickered between, displaying code and what appeared to be stock market data. But as Tom connected the final components, Marcus began to understand that this improvised machine represented something far more sophisticated than its appearance suggested. "It's beautiful," Tom said, stepping back to admire his work. 15 years of theoretical development finally made real. What exactly does it do? Pattern recognition, but not the way TechNova's systems work. Instead of analyzing historical data to predict future trends, this machine identifies artificial patterns, market manipulations, coordinated trades, algorithmic interventions designed to create specific outcomes. Tom powered up the device, and immediately the screen began displaying a real-time analysis of trading activity. Unlike the smooth curves and predictable fluctuations Marcus was accustomed to seeing, this display highlighted sharp spikes, sudden reversals, and trading volumes that seemed to violate normal market logic. Every one of these anomalies represents someone manipulating prices for profit, Tom explained. Most of them are small-scale operations, penny stock pumps, earnings report leaks, insider trading schemes. But some, he pointed to larger distortions. On the screen, these are industrial-scale manipulations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Marcus watched the data flow, recognizing some of the stocks being flagged. Major corporations, established funds, companies he'd assumed operated with complete integrity. This is impossible. The SEC, the exchanges, the regulatory oversight systems, they're supposed to catch this kind of activity. They catch the obvious stuff. Crude manipulations, small-time operators who don't know how to cover their tracks. But sophisticated operations, like Robert's network, they know how to game the oversight systems. Tom adjusted the device's parameters, and the display zoomed in on TechNova's stock price over the past 6 months. The pattern was unmistakable. Once Tom highlighted it, coordinated selling that drove the price down, followed by equally coordinated buying that accumulated shares while maintaining the appearance of a distressed stock. They've been manipulating TechNova's price since before the data breach, Marcus realized. The data breach was just the excuse they needed to accelerate the process. Look at this. Tom highlighted trading activity from 2 weeks before the security incident became public. Someone was already shorting TechNova stock in massive quantities. They knew what was coming. The evidence was damning, but it raised uncomfortable questions about Marcus's own awareness of his company's situation. "I should have noticed this," Marcus said. "I reviewed our stock performance every week. How did I miss such obvious manipulation? Because it wasn't obvious unless you knew what to look for. And because," Tom hesitated, then continued gently, "because you were probably focused on other metrics. Revenue, client satisfaction, technical performance. Stock price manipulation is almost invisible unless you're specifically looking for it." Tom opened another screen, showing TechNova's internal financial reports. Even to Marcus, who'd reviewed these documents countless times, Tom's analysis revealed patterns he'd never noticed. "Your revenue numbers have been artificially inflated for at least 3 years, Tom observed. Not through fraud exactly, but through aggressive accounting practices that pushed income forward and deferred expenses. Robert's recommendations, Marcus admitted. He said it would smooth out quarterly fluctuations and make us more attractive to investors. It also made TechNova look more valuable than it actually was, which justified a higher stock price. Higher stock price means more shares needed to acquire control, which means larger profits when the manipulation drives the price down. The mathematical elegance of the scheme was almost admirable in its complexity. Robert hadn't just sabotaged TechNova's operations. He'd systematically inflated the company's apparent value to maximize the eventual payoff from its destruction. "We have to show this to someone," Marcus said. "The FBI, the SEC, the congressional investigators. We will. But first, we need to make sure the evidence is bulletproof. These people have expensive lawyers and powerful friends. If we present a case that has any holes, they'll exploit them and probably discredit us permanently." Tom began running diagnostic tests on his prototype device, verifying that its calculations were accurate and its data sources were legitimate. The process took several hours, during which Marcus found himself studying Tom more carefully. Despite his homeless appearance, Tom moved through technical challenges with the confidence of someone accustomed to solving complex problems under pressure. His understanding of both software and hardware was encyclopedic, and his ability to improvise solutions with limited resources suggested years of experience working in difficult conditions. "Tom, when you were in Army intelligence, what exactly did you do?" Tom paused in his testing. "Signals intelligence primarily. Electronic surveillance, data analysis, pattern recognition. We'd monitor enemy communications, identify command structures, predict tactical movements based on electronic signatures." That explains your approach to Robert's network. Same skill set, different application. Instead of tracking Taliban commanders, I've been tracking corporate conspirators. The techniques are remarkably similar. Tom completed his diagnostics and began preparing the device for its first real test. He connected it to TechNova's internal network, then began scanning through years of historical data. "What are you looking for?" "The exact moment when Robert first started compromising your systems. If I can pinpoint when the sabotage began, it will help establish a timeline that supports our case." The scan took nearly an hour, but eventually Tom found what he was looking for. The screen displayed a network diagram showing TechNova's system architecture, with specific components highlighted in red. "There," Tom said, pointing to a timestamp from 4 years ago. "That's when Robert installed his first backdoor, a small modification to your authentication system that gave him administrative access without generating audit logs." 4 years ago? But he'd only been with the company for 6 months then. He was planning this from the beginning. The position at TechNova wasn't a career move, it was an infiltration mission. Tom traced through additional evidence, showing how Robert had gradually expanded his access over time. Security protocols had been weakened, backup systems had been compromised, and monitoring systems had been modified to hide his activities. Every change was small enough to avoid notice, Tom explained, but collectively they left TechNova completely vulnerable to the kind of attack that brought the company down. Marcus felt sick. For 4 years, he'd worked alongside Robert, trusted him with critical decisions, even considered him a friend. The betrayal was professional and personal. "I recommended him for bonuses," Marcus said. "Stock options. I'd probably gave him $1 million in compensation over 5 years. And he used that money to fund the destruction of your company. It's elegant, really making the victim pay for their own destruction." Tom's analysis revealed the full scope of Robert's infiltration. Not only had he compromised TechNova's technical systems, but he'd also systematically undermined the company's relationships with clients, partners, and regulators. "Look at this," Tom said, highlighting a series of communications. "Robert has been feeding negative information about TechNova to financial journalists, regulatory officials, and competing firms for over 2 years. He's been creating the conditions for a crisis long before the data breach gave him an excuse to trigger it. The evidence was overwhelming, but it was also depressing. Marcus realized that TechNova's downfall hadn't been the result of his mistakes or market forces. It had been the inevitable outcome of a long-term plan executed by someone he trusted completely. "Why didn't I see any of this?" "Because you're not a paranoid person," Tom said simply. "You assumed that people meant what they said and that business partnerships were based on mutual interest. Those are healthy assumptions in most situations. But not in this situation. No, Robert and his associates are predators. They identify successful, trusting people and exploit their good nature. Your integrity was actually what made you vulnerable." Tom began shutting down his prototype device, carefully preserving the data it had generated. "The good news is that we now have irrefutable evidence of systematic fraud. The pattern is clear, the timeline is documented, and the financial impact is quantifiable. Any competent prosecutor should be able to build a strong case." "And the bad news?" "The bad news is that we're about to go to war with people who have unlimited resources and no ethical constraints. They've already destroyed dozens of companies and hundreds of lives. They won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect their operation." Tom looked directly at Marcus, his expression serious. "Once we present this evidence, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain you're ready for that kind of fight?" Marcus thought about his children, his employees, his clients, and all the other victims of Robert's schemes. The answer came without hesitation. "Yes, I'm ready." The resignation letter had been sitting in Marcus's desk drawer for 3 weeks, sealed and ready to submit. He'd written it during one of his darkest moments, when the weight of TechNova's collapse felt too heavy to carry. The letter was simple and direct: acceptance of responsibility, apology to shareholders and employees, and resignation from all positions effective immediately. Now, holding the envelope in his hands, Marcus wondered if stepping down would be the easy way out or the cowardly way out. "You don't have to decide today," Tom said from across the room, where he was organizing the evidence files they'd compiled. "But you should know that if you resign now, it makes our job much harder." "How so?" "Credibility. If the CEO abandons ship before the fight begins, it suggests either guilt or cowardice. Either way, it undermines our narrative that TechNova was victimized by a criminal conspiracy." Marcus set the letter aside and joined Tom at the evidence table. Over the past 2 days, they'd assembled a comprehensive case file that included financial records, communication logs, technical documentation, and witness statements. It was impressive work, but Marcus still had doubts about their chances of success. "Tom, be honest with me. What are the odds that we can actually stop Robert and his associates?" Tom considered the question carefully. "In a fair fight?" "Pretty good. We have solid evidence, clear motives, and a compelling story. But this won't be a fair fight. They have resources we can't match, connections we can't access, and experience in fighting these kinds of battles. So why are we doing this?" "Because someone has to. And because," Tom gestured at the evidence spread across the table, "because we might be the only people with enough information to expose the full scope of what they're doing." Tom opened one of his notebooks to a page filled with newspaper clippings. The headlines told a familiar story. Tech startup collapses after security breach. Investment firm declares bankruptcy following scandal. Family business sold after founder's death. Every one of these companies was destroyed by Robert's network, Tom explained. Different methods, different timelines, but the same basic pattern. And in every case, the real perpetrators walked away wealthy while the victims lost everything. Marcus studied the clippings, recognizing some of the company names. These weren't small businesses or marginal ventures. They were established firms with good reputations and solid performance records. "How many families do you think were affected by these collapses?" Marcus asked. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands if you count employees, suppliers, customers, and investors. Each company that goes down creates a ripple effect that touches everyone connected to it. The human cost was staggering. Marcus thought about his own employees, many of whom had worked for TechNova for over a decade. They built careers around the company, made financial plans based on its stability, trusted him to protect their livelihoods. "I owe them more than a resignation letter," Marcus said. "You owe them a fight," Tom agreed. "Even if we lose, even. If Robert's network destroys us both, at least we'll have tried to hold them accountable." Tom's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it quickly. Then his expression darkened. "What is it?" "Sarah. She says Robert just arrived at the office. He's asking questions about why the servers are running and who's been accessing the systems." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He knows we're here, probably. Or he's suspicious enough to investigate. Either way, we need to accelerate our timeline. Tom began rapidly copying files to external drives, preparing to move their evidence to secure locations before Robert could interfere with their work. "How much time do we have?" Marcus asked. "Assuming he's coming up here to confront us directly, maybe 10 minutes. And if he's not coming up here, then he's probably calling his associates to coordinate a response to whatever he thinks we're doing. Either way, we're about to enter the active phase of this conflict." Tom finished copying the critical files and began shutting down his improvised workstation. Despite the time pressure, his movements remained calm and methodical. "Marcus, I need you to make a choice right now. We can pack up this evidence and disappear until we figure out how to present it safely. Or we can stand our ground and confront Robert directly. What do you recommend? Professionally? We should run. Robert is dangerous, and we're not prepared for a direct confrontation." But personally, Tom paused, looking at the evidence they'd assembled. "I'm tired of running. I've spent 15 years hiding from these people, and I'm ready to face them." Marcus heard footsteps in the hallway outside the server room. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Robert wasn't coming alone. "They're here," Marcus whispered. Tom nodded calmly. "Last chance to change your mind." Marcus thought about the resignation letter in his drawer, the easy exit it represented. Then he thought about his children, who needed a father they could be proud of. He thought about Sarah, whose loyalty deserved better than abandonment. He thought about all the other victims of Robert's schemes, people who'd never had a chance to fight back. "I'm not running," Marcus said. The footsteps stopped outside the server room door. There was a brief murmur of voices, then a sharp knock. "Marcus, it's Robert. We need to talk." Tom moved to stand beside Marcus, and for a moment, the two men looked at each other with understanding. Whatever happened next would define not just their own futures, but potentially the futures of everyone Robert's network had victimized. "Come in," Marcus called. The door opened to reveal Robert Hayes, flanked by two men Marcus didn't recognize. Robert looked exactly as he always had, impeccably dressed, perfectly groomed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your own superiority. The two men with him were younger, harder, with the watchful alertness of people accustomed to potential violence. "Marcus," Robert said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I have to admit, I'm curious about what you're doing here. The company is supposed to be shutting down operations." "We're documenting the security breach," Marcus replied. Sure, we understand exactly what happened." Robert's gaze shifted to Tom, and for the first time, Marcus saw genuine surprise cross his former CTO's face. "And you are?" "Someone who remembers you," Tom said quietly. "Mitchell Systems, Seattle, 15 years ago." The color drained from Robert's face. For just a moment, his composure cracked, and Marcus caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating beneath the polished exterior. "I don't know what you're talking about," Robert said. but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Of course you do," Tom replied. "You remember Elisa, don't you? My wife? The nurse whose career you destroyed? And Emma, my daughter? She'd be 23. Now, if you're curious, probably graduated from college, maybe starting a career of her own. Of course, she doesn't know her father very well, thanks to you." Robert's companion shifted positions slightly, moving to flank Tom and Marcus. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Robert said, his composure returning. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Without," he gestured vaguely at Tom, "without involving unstable individuals who might not be thinking clearly." "Thomas Mitchell isn't unstable," Marcus said. "He's the most stable person I've met in months. He's also the person who figured out exactly how you've been destroying TechNova for the past 5 years. Robert's smile disappeared entirely. "I see. And I suppose you have some theory about malicious activity? Some paranoid fantasy about conspiracies and sabotage?" "We have evidence," Tom said simply. "Financial records, communication logs, technical documentation. Everything we need to prove systematic fraud and corporate sabotage. Evidence that could be fabricated by someone with the right technical skills and an axe to grind," Robert countered. "Evidence provided by a homeless man with obvious mental health issues and a disgraced CEO desperate to blame his failures on someone else." The words stung because they contained just enough truth to be believable. Marcus could imagine how the story would sound to investigators: a failed executive and an unstable vagrant, making wild accusations against a respected business leader. "The evidence speaks for itself," Marcus said. "Does it? Or does it simply tell the story you want it to tell?" Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. "Marcus, you're making a mistake. I've been trying to help you through this crisis, but if you persist with these accusations, I won't be able to protect you from the legal consequences." "Legal consequences?" "Securities fraud, conspiracy, criminal negligence. The list is quite long. With the right presentation, a prosecutor could argue that you and your," Robert glanced at Tom, "co-conspirator have been manipulating TechNova systems and finances for personal gain. The evidence you think exonerates you could just as easily be used to convict you." The threat was elegant in its simplicity. Robert was suggesting that the same evidence they'd gathered to prove his guilt could be reframed to prove theirs. "You can't be serious," Marcus said. "I'm completely serious. In fact, I'd say you have about 5 minutes to make a very important decision. You can accept responsibility for TechNova's collapse, resign quietly, and disappear into obscurity. Or you can continue with this investigation and face criminal prosecution that will destroy what's left of your reputation and probably land you in federal prison." Robert's companions had moved closer during his speech, and Marcus realized they were completely surrounded. The server room that had felt like a sanctuary now felt like a trap. "And Tom?" Marcus asked. "Mr. Mitchell will disappear again. Permanently. This time, it shouldn't be difficult. Homeless people go missing all the time, and no one really looks for them." The casual way Robert discussed eliminating Tom was perhaps the most chilling moment of the entire confrontation. This wasn't the polished executive Marcus had worked with for 5 years. This was someone capable of ordering murder as easily as ordering lunch. "You have 30 seconds to decide," Robert continued. "Resign and disappear, or face the consequences of opposing people with resources you can't imagine." Marcus looked at Tom, who stood perfectly still despite being outnumbered and outgunned. There was no fear in the older man's eyes, just a quiet determination that suggested he'd been preparing for this moment for 15 years. "I've already decided," Marcus said. "Good choice," Robert said, misinterpreting Marcus's response. "Your resignation will be effective." "I've decided to fight," Marcus interrupted. "Whatever it costs, whatever it takes." "You're not going to destroy another company," or hurt another family. Robert's expression hardened. Then you've chosen poorly. The family photograph was more than just an image. It was Tom's anchor to the person he used to be. In quiet moments, when the weight of 15 years on the streets threatened to crush what remained of his spirit, he would pull out the one picture and remember why he kept fighting. Lisa had been 8 months pregnant with Emma when the photo was taken. She was glowing with that special radiance that comes with impending motherhood, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Tom stood behind her, his arms wrapped around both of them, his face showing a contentment he'd never experienced before or since. "She was born 6 weeks later," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert and his associates had left after delivering their ultimatum, but the threat of their return hung heavy in the air. 7 pounds 3 ounces, perfect in every way. Marcus had never heard Tom talk about his daughter in present tense before. The shift from past to present was subtle, but telling. Despite 15 years of separation, Emma was still the center of Tom's world. "Do you ever see her?" "From a distance sometimes." She graduated from University of Washington last year with a degree in social work. She's working at a homeless shelter in Tacoma now, helping people who, Tom's voice caught, people like me. The irony was heartbreaking. Emma had dedicated her career to helping homeless individuals, never knowing that her own father was living on the streets just a few miles away. "She doesn't know you're alive." "She knows I exist, but she thinks I abandoned them." Lisa told her that I chose my obsession with the business over my family, that I disappeared rather than face the consequences of my failures. It was easier than explaining the truth. Tom carefully returned the photograph to his notebook, handling it with the reverence of a sacred relic. Maybe that's for the best. What kind of father would I be now? I'm 53 years old. I haven't held a steady job in 15 years, and I live under a bridge. She's better off thinking I'm a failure than knowing I'm a disaster. "You're not a disaster," Marcus said firmly. "You're the most principled person I've ever met. You've sacrificed everything to expose the truth about Robert's network. Principle doesn't pay rent. It doesn't provide stability for a child. It doesn't keep a family together when the bills start piling up." Tom began packing up his equipment, moving with the efficient motions of someone accustomed to rapid relocations. Despite Robert's temporary departure, both men understood that staying in the TechNova building was no longer safe. "Where will you go?" Marcus asked. "I have places. Safe houses, you might call them. Locations where Robert's people can't find me." Tom paused in his packing. "The question is where you'll go." Marcus hadn't considered that he might need to go anywhere. This was his company, his office, his city. The idea of abandoning everything and going into hiding felt like admitting defeat. "I can't run away." "TechNova is my responsibility. TechNova is gone, Marcus. The building, the assets, the corporate structure, they'll all be liquidated within days. What you're responsible for now is making sure the truth comes out." Tom finished packing his essential equipment into a battered duffel bag. The sophisticated workstation that had taken 2 days to assemble disappeared in less than 20 minutes, leaving no trace of their investigation except for the evidence. Files they'd already secured. "Robert will move quickly now that he knows we're onto him," Tom continued. "He'll accelerate the bankruptcy proceedings, finalize the asset acquisition, and probably arrange for both of us to have accidents before we can present our evidence." "Accidents?" "Car crashes, muggings gone wrong, overdoses for people who don't use drugs. Robert's associates have a wide repertoire. They prefer methods that look random or self-inflicted." The casual way Tom discussed potential murder attempts was unsettling. Marcus realized that his new partner had been living with these threats for 15 years, always watching over his shoulder, never completely safe. How do you stand it? The constant fear. You learn to compartmentalize. Focus on the mission, not the risks. And you remember that some things are worth dying for. Tom's phone buzzed with another message from Sarah. The text was brief but urgent. Robert meeting with lawyers. Bankruptcy filing moved up to tomorrow morning. Also, your children called. They want to see you. Marcus felt his heart jump. Emma and David hadn't spoken to him since the scandal broke 3 months ago. If they were reaching out now, it might mean they were ready to listen to his side of the story. You should go, Tom said, reading the message over Marcus's shoulder. See your kids. This might be your last chance before things get really complicated. What about the investigation? I can handle the next phase alone. In fact, it might be better if we split up for a while. Harder for Robert's people to track us both if we're not together. Marcus was torn between his responsibilities as a father and his commitment to exposing Robert's crimes. Both felt equally important, and both demanded immediate attention. How will I contact you? Tom handed Marcus a cell phone that looked like it had been purchased sometime during the Clinton administration. This is secure, untraceable, encrypted, completely off the grid. I'll call you in 24 hours with an update. Tom, Marcus paused, searching for the right words. What you've done, the sacrifices you've made, I want you to know that I understand the cost, and I want you to know that it won't be wasted. Tom shouldered his duffel bag and moved toward the server room exit. At the doorway, he turned back to Marcus. There's something else you should know about Emma, my daughter. She uses her mother's maiden name now, but her full name is Emma Mitchell-Chun. Marcus felt confusion, then recognition, then shock. Sarah's niece. The girl who interned here 2 summers ago. My daughter, Tom confirmed. She spent 6 weeks working 10 feet from my old office, and I watched her through security cameras every day. She has Lisa's eyes, but my stubborn streak. She's going to change the world someday. The revelation reframed everything Marcus thought he knew about the situation. Sarah had never mentioned having a niece named Emma, but Marcus remembered the intern brilliant, determined, passionate about using technology to help disadvantaged communities. Does Sarah know who you are? She knows I exist, but she doesn't know I'm here. Emma never talks about her father, and Sarah never pushes. Some wounds are too deep to explore casually. Tom opened the server room door and checked the hallway for threats. Finding it empty, he prepared to leave. One more thing, Marcus. When you see your children, tell them the truth. All of it. They're old enough to handle complex moral situations, and they deserve to know why you're taking this risk. And if they think I'm making a mistake, then you'll know you raised them to think for themselves. But I suspect they'll surprise you. Kids usually understand justice better than adults do. Tom disappeared into the hallway, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and his choices. The weight of the past few days was beginning to settle on him. The discovery of Robert's betrayal, the evidence of systematic fraud, the threats against his life, and now the revelation about Emma's connection to their situation. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his ex-wife. Jennifer, it's me. I got the message about the kids. Can we meet somewhere? I have some things I need to explain. Jennifer's voice was cautious, but not hostile. They're worried about you, Marcus. All this bankruptcy stuff, the congressional hearings, they don't understand what's happening. I don't understand all of it either, but I'm starting to. Can we meet at the coffee shop near Emma's school? I need to tell them something important. An hour later, Marcus sat across from his children in a corner booth at Grind Coffee, the same place where he used to take them for hot chocolate when they were small. Emma was 20 now, a junior at Northwestern studying environmental policy. David was 17, still in high school, but already showing the analytical mind that ran in the Sterling family. They looked older than Marcus remembered, more serious, carrying the weight of watching their father's public humiliation play out in business magazines and congressional hearings. Dad, Emma said carefully, We want to understand what happened to TechNova, but every story we read makes it sound worse. They're saying you might go to prison. Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing echoes of his own features mixed with Jennifer's strength and compassion. Tom was right, she did have her mother's eyes, but there was something else there too. A determination that reminded Marcus of someone else. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, Marcus began, but I need you to listen to the whole story before you decide whether to believe it. He told them everything. Robert's infiltration of TechNova, the systematic sabotage disguised as security lapses, the evidence of a larger conspiracy that had destroyed dozens of companies over the past decade. He explained about Tom Mitchell, the homeless man who'd spent 15 years documenting Robert's crimes while living on the streets. A homeless man? David asked skeptically. Dad, that sounds crazy. I know. But he's not crazy, and he's not making it up. He has evidence, documentation, proof of everything he's claiming. Emma had been quiet during most of Marcus's explanation, but now she leaned forward with interest. This man, Tom Mitchell, what did he do before he became homeless? He was a software consultant. Had his own company in Seattle called Mitchell Systems. Emma's expression changed subtly. Mitchell Systems. That's interesting. Why? Because I wrote my senior thesis on corporate whistleblowing, and Mitchell Systems came up in my research. There was a business partner who destroyed the company through fraud, then had the owner blacklisted throughout the industry. The owner disappeared, and most people assumed he'd committed suicide. Marcus felt a chill. You know about Tom's story? I know the public version. But if this Tom Mitchell is the same person, then he's been presumed dead for over a decade. His wife remarried. His daughter thinks her father abandoned her. The conversation was veering into territory Marcus hadn't anticipated. His children were connecting dots he didn't even realize existed. Emma, when you wrote about Mitchell Systems, did you research what happened to the family? Some. The wife was a nurse who lost her job after a patient death. She blamed the stress of the business collapse. The daughter was raised by her grandparents and eventually took her mother's maiden name. David looked confused. What does any of this have to do with Dad's situation? But Emma was already putting pieces together. Dad, what's Tom Mitchell's daughter's name? Marcus hesitated, remembering Tom's revelation about Emma Chun, Sarah's niece, the intern who'd worked at TechNova. Why do you ask? Because if it's Emma Chun, then this story just became a lot more personal for all of us. Marcus stared at his daughter, wondering how she could have made that connection so quickly. How did you know? Because Emma Chun was in my environmental policy study group last semester. She's incredibly smart, incredibly passionate about social justice, and she absolutely refuses to talk about her father. She just says he left when she was young and that she's better off without him. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His daughter knew Tom's daughter. They were friends, study partners, part of the same academic community. She doesn't know her father is alive, Marcus said. No, but she should. Emma's voice was firm, carrying the moral certainty of someone who'd inherited both her parents' sense of justice. If this Tom Mitchell has been fighting to expose corruption for 15 years, if he sacrificed everything to protect other families from what happened to his, then his daughter deserves to know the truth. David was still trying to catch up. Wait, so Dad's business partner is the same guy who destroyed this homeless man's company 15 years ago? That's what it looks like, Marcus confirmed. And now the homeless man is helping Dad fight back? Yes. David absorbed this information, then looked at his father with an expression Marcus hadn't seen in months, respect mixed with pride. Dad, that's actually pretty cool. I mean, it's also terrifying and probably dangerous, but it's cool. Emma was more practical. What's your plan? How are you going to expose this conspiracy without getting killed or discredited? Marcus realized that his children had accepted his story without the skepticism he'd expected. They understood the moral dimensions of the situation and were already thinking strategically about solutions. I'm not sure yet. Tom has the evidence, but presenting it safely is going to be complicated. These people have enormous resources, and they've already threatened both of us. Then you need allies, Emma said. People with credibility and media access who can help amplify your story. And legal protection, David added. Maybe whistleblower status or prosecutorial immunity. Marcus looked at his children with amazement. When had they become so sophisticated about complex ethical and legal issues? There's something else, Marcus said. If we go forward with this investigation, there's a good chance I'll face criminal charges. The evidence that proves Robert's guilt could be twisted to suggest that I was complicit. Are you prepared for that possibility? Emma and David exchanged a look, communicating in the wordless way that siblings develop over years of shared experience. Dad, Emma said finally, we've watched you struggle with guilt and shame for months. We've seen you blame yourself for things that weren't your fault. If you have a chance to clear your name and help other people at the same time, then you have to take it. Even if it means more public humiliation, more media attention, more risk. Especially then, David said, because that's what integrity looks like. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. For the first time in months, his children were looking at him with admiration instead of disappointment. I love you both, he said, and I'm proud of the people you've become. We love you too, Dad, Emma replied. Now let's figure out how to save your company and reunite a family in the process. As they began planning their next steps, Marcus realized that Tom had been right about children understanding justice better than adults. His kids didn't just support his decision to fight back, they were ready to help him do it. The hidden server was tucked away in a sub-basement of the TechNova building that didn't appear on any official blueprints. Tom had discovered it 3 days ago while mapping the building's electronic infrastructure, following cable runs that seemed to lead nowhere. What he found was a sophisticated data processing center that had been operating in secret for over 2 years. This changes everything, Tom said, his voice tight with excitement and anger as he showed Marcus the hidden facility. Robert hasn't just been sabotaging TechNova. He's been using your company as a front for a massive surveillance operation. The server room was pristine, climate-controlled, and filled with equipment that was far more advanced than anything in TechNova's official data center. Banks of processors hummed quietly while massive storage arrays blinked with activity. Multiple internet connections provided redundant access to external networks, and the entire facility was shielded against electronic surveillance. What exactly is it doing? Marcus asked, studying the displays that showed streams of data flowing through the system. Industrial espionage on a scale I've never seen before. Look at this. Tom pulled up a monitoring screen that showed real-time data feeds from hundreds of sources. Banking transactions, email communications, social media activity, government databases. It's collecting intelligence on thousands of individuals and organizations. Marcus recognized some of the names on the target list. Competing tech companies, regulatory officials, congressional representatives, financial journalists, and potential investors. The scope was breathtaking. How is this possible? The legal requirements, the privacy protections, all bypassed through a combination of hacking, social engineering, and corrupted insiders. They're not just breaking the law, they're operating a private intelligence agency that would make the NSA jealous. Tom navigated through the system's interfaces, revealing layer after layer of sophisticated surveillance capabilities. Email interception, financial transaction monitoring, location tracking, communication pattern analysis, every tool needed to build comprehensive profiles of anyone who might threaten their operations. Robert has been using this system to stay ahead of every investigation, every regulatory inquiry, every potential whistleblower. He knows what investigators are planning before they do. The implications were staggering. Every congressional hearing, every SEC investigation, every journalistic inquiry into corporate malfeasance, Robert's network had advanced intelligence about all of it. That's how they've avoided prosecution for so long, Marcus realized. They know exactly what evidence investigators are looking for and how to hide it. More than that, they know which investigators to bribe, which witnesses to intimidate, which evidence to destroy. This system has made them essentially untouchable. Tom opened a file directory labeled Active Operations and began scrolling through hundreds of folders, each one representing a different target or objective. Marcus saw TechNova's name, along with dozens of other companies he recognized. They're not just destroying companies, Tom observed. They're destroying entire sectors. Clean energy, healthcare innovation, financial technology, any industry. That threatens established interests or reduces profit margins for traditional players. One folder caught Marcus's attention. Congressional Oversight Committee. Inside were detailed dossiers on every member of the committee that was supposed to be investigating TechNova's data breach. They know everything, Marcus said, reading through the files. Personal finances, family problems, political vulnerabilities. Sexual indiscretions, information that could destroy careers or ruin lives. Which explains why the congressional hearings have been so ineffective. The investigators are being blackmailed or manipulated into avoiding the real questions. Tom pulled up a communication log that showed regular encrypted messages between Robert and various government officials. The content was coded, but the pattern was clear. Information was being exchanged. Favors were being granted. Investigations were being misdirected. This isn't just corporate crime, Marcus said. This is systematic corruption of the regulatory and oversight systems that is supposed to protect the public. And it goes all the way to the top. Look at this, Tom highlighted. A series of files related to senior officials in multiple agencies. They have leverage on people in the SEC, the FBI, the Justice Department, even federal judges. The network of corruption was vast, interconnected, and apparently unbreakable. Every institution that might investigate or prosecute their crimes was compromised by blackmail, bribery, or manipulation. How do we fight something this big? Marcus asked. Tom was quiet for a long moment, studying the data streams flowing across multiple monitors. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a grim determination. We don't fight it. We expose it, all of it, at the same time, in a way that makes it impossible to suppress or discredit. How? By doing exactly what they've been doing to everyone else, but in reverse. Instead of using information to destroy people, we use it to reveal the truth. Tom began copying files from the hidden server, downloading terabytes of evidence that documented years of criminal activity. Financial records, communication logs, operational plans, target lists, everything needed to expose the full scope of the conspiracy. This will take hours to download, Tom noted. And once we start, they'll know we've found their command center. We'll have to move fast after that. While the files transferred, Tom explained what they'd discovered. The hidden server wasn't just a tool for corporate sabotage. It was the hub of a shadow network that influenced politics, manipulated markets, and controlled information flows across multiple industries. They call themselves the Acquisition Group, Tom said, reading from an internal document. Their stated objective is to optimize market efficiency through strategic asset consolidation and regulatory capture. That's corporate speak for destroying competition and corrupting government oversight. Exactly. And they've been incredibly successful. Over the past decade, they've eliminated hundreds of innovative companies, prevented countless new technologies from reaching market, and consolidated control over entire economic sectors. Tom showed Marcus a financial analysis that detailed the group's profits. The numbers were astronomical: billions of dollars in assets acquired at below-market prices, trillions of dollars in market value concentrated among a small number of allied firms. It's not just about money, Tom continued. It's about power. Control over innovation, control over information, control over the economic and political systems that govern modern society. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were uncovering. Tom, even if we expose all of this, who's going to believe us? And who's going to act on it if half the government is compromised? That's where things get interesting. Remember the files we found on congressional investigators? The blackmail material? Some of it is blackmail material, but some of it is evidence that specific officials are clean people who can't be bought or intimidated because they don't have exploitable vulnerabilities. Tom pulled up a shorter list of names, perhaps 24 individuals across various government agencies. These people are the reason Robert's group has been careful to avoid certain types of exposure. They represent the parts of the system that still function honestly. And you think they'll help us? I think they'll have to. Once this information becomes public, they'll be under enormous pressure to act. And they'll have all the evidence. They need to build airtight cases. The file transfer was nearly complete. Tom began preparing multiple copies of the evidence, distributing them across secure servers around the world. There's one more thing, Tom said. The hidden server contains detailed plans for their next phase of operations. They're not just targeting individual companies anymore. They're planning to manipulate entire market sectors. Tom opened a file labeled Phase 3 Implementation that outlined a strategy for orchestrating a coordinated economic crisis. Simultaneous attacks on key financial institutions, technology companies, and infrastructure providers, all designed to create panic conditions that would justify massive government intervention and regulatory changes. They're planning to crash the economy? Marcus asked. Parts of it. Specifically, the parts that threaten their control. Then they'll position themselves as the solution, offering to stabilize markets and restore confidence in exchange for unprecedented regulatory concessions. When? Tom checked the timeline embedded in the operational plan. Soon, within the next 6 months, based on these projections. The revelation added urgency to their mission. Exposing Robert's network wasn't just about saving TechNova or getting justice for past victims. It was about preventing a coordinated attack on the entire economic system. We have to stop them, Marcus said. We have to expose them, Tom corrected. Stopping them will be up to the people who receive this information and decide what to do with it. The file transfer completed with a soft chime. Tom ejected the storage devices and began shutting down the hidden server's monitoring systems. Now comes the hard part, Tom said. We have maybe 12 hours before they realize we've discovered their command center and copied all their files. We need to get this evidence to people who can act on it, and we need to do it in a way that makes it impossible for them to suppress or discredit. What do you have in mind? Tom smiled grimly. Remember how I told you that I've been preparing for this confrontation for 15 years? Well, I haven't just been gathering evidence. I've also been building a distribution network. Tom pulled out his secure phone and began sending encrypted messages to contacts around the world. Within minutes, replies started coming back. Journalists, investigators, activists, and government officials in multiple countries, all confirming their readiness to receive and act on the evidence. By tomorrow morning, Tom said, this information will be in the hands of 50 different people across 6 different countries. Even if Robert's group manages to silence some of them, enough will survive to tell the story. Marcus watched the coordination unfold with amazement. The homeless man he'd met just days ago had built an international network of allies capable of exposing one of the largest criminal conspiracies in modern history. "Tom," Marcus said, "I owe you an apology. When you first walked into my office, I thought you were just another victim looking for someone to blame for his problems. You weren't wrong. I am a victim, and I was looking for someone to blame. The difference is that my blame was justified, and I had the patience to spend 15 years gathering proof." Tom finished his communications and began packing the evidence files. "The question now is whether you're ready for what comes next. Once we release this information, there's no going back. Robert and his associates will do everything they can to destroy us, discredit us, and eliminate us." Marcus thought about his children, who had already given him their blessing to fight. He thought about the thousands of people who had lost their jobs when the acquisition group destroyed their companies. He thought about the democratic institutions that were being corrupted by systematic blackmail and manipulation. "I'm ready," he said. Tom nodded and handed Marcus one of the storage devices containing their evidence. "Then let's bring down the house of cards." The congressional subpoena arrived at 6:47 a.m., delivered by a federal marshal, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than serving legal documents to a man living under a bridge. Tom accepted the papers with the calm dignity of someone who'd been expecting this moment for 15 years. "Thomas Mitchell," the marshal read from his official paperwork, "you are hereby commanded to appear before the House Committee on Financial Services for testimony regarding corporate malfeasance and securities fraud." "I'll be there," Tom said, simply. The marshal looked around at Tom's makeshift shelter, a carefully arranged collection of tarps, cardboard, and salvage materials that provided modest protection from the elements. It was hard to imagine this environment producing a witness important enough to warrant a congressional subpoena. "Sir, do you need assistance with transportation, or I can manage?" Tom interrupted gently. "Thank you." After the marshal left, Tom began the methodical process of preparing for what might be his final public appearance. He had clean clothes stored in a waterproof container, along with toiletries and the kind of personal grooming supplies that most people took for granted. The transformation from homeless vagrant to credible witness took less than an hour, but the psychological preparation had taken 15 years. Marcus was waiting at the prearranged meeting location, a small cafe near the Capitol building that served decent coffee and minded its own business. When Tom arrived, freshly shaved and wearing a simple but clean suit, Marcus barely recognized him. "You look like someone worth listening to," Tom finished. That was the idea. They sat in a corner booth, speaking in low voices while reviewing their strategy for the day ahead. The congressional hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m., with Tom as the star witness. They had distributed copies of their evidence to journalists and investigators around the world, but the hearing would be their only chance to present their findings to a national audience. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked. "Terrified," Tom admitted, but also relieved. Carrying this secret for 15 years has been exhausting. Whatever happens today, at least the truth will be on the record. Tom's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Withdraw your testimony and disappear. Final warning. Robert's people?" Marcus asked, reading over Tom's shoulder. "Probably. Although it could be any number of people who want this information suppressed." Tom deleted the message without responding. The threats started around midnight. 47 messages so far, ranging from bribery offers to death threats. "Maybe we should ask for protective custody." "From whom?" "Half the federal law enforcement apparatus is compromised, according to our evidence. We're on our own until we can identify which officials are trustworthy." They spent the morning reviewing Tom's testimony, fine-tuning the presentation to maximize impact while minimizing legal exposure. The evidence was overwhelming, but presenting it effectively would require precision and clarity. "Remember," Marcus said, They're going to try to discredit you personally before they address the substance of your claims. Homeless man makes wild accusations against respected business leaders. That's the narrative they'll push. Let them. Every minute they spend attacking my credibility is a minute they're not spending debunking the evidence. And the evidence speaks for itself. At 11 a.m., Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed his ex-wife's number. Jennifer? What's wrong? Marcus, I need you to come home immediately. Emma and David, they're gone. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Gone? What do you mean gone? They left early this morning. Emma said they were going to help with something important, something related to your investigation. I thought they were just going to the library, but Jennifer's voice broke with barely controlled panic. Marcus, they left notes. They're planning to attend your congressional hearing. They think they can help somehow. Jesus, where are they now? I don't know. They're not answering their phones. Marcus, if something happens to them because of this investigation, nothing's going to happen to them. Marcus said, though he didn't believe it himself. I'll find them and bring them home. Safely. Marcus ended the call and turned to Tom, who had overheard enough of the conversation to understand the situation. They're trying to help, Tom said quietly. Emma probably figured out that her connection to my daughter gives her unique credibility. She can corroborate parts of our story from an independent perspective. They're also putting themselves in danger. Robert's people won't hesitate to hurt children if they threaten the operation. Tom's expression hardened. Then we need to make sure the hearing happens exactly as planned. The best way to protect your children is to expose the conspiracy so thoroughly that Robert's network can't retaliate without confirming their guilt. At 1 p.m., they arrived at the Rayburn House office building, where security was unusually heavy. Metal detectors, bag searches, and multiple credential checks slowed the entry process. But Marcus noticed that most of the security personnel were unfamiliar faces, probably brought in specifically for this hearing. Private contractors, Tom observed, watching the guards with a professional eye. Someone wanted to control access very carefully. The hearing room was packed with journalists, congressional staff, and observers from various government agencies. Marcus spotted several faces he recognized from Robert's surveillance files, people who were supposedly investigating corporate malfeasance while actually working to suppress it. But he also saw faces that didn't appear in Robert's files honest. Officials who had somehow avoided compromise. Journalists with reputations for integrity, and activists who had been fighting corporate corruption for years. Our audience is mixed, Tom noted. Some of these people are here to discredit us, but others are here to learn the truth. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus finally spotted his children in the gallery. Emma and David were sitting with a young woman. Marcus didn't recognize Asian features, intense eyes, an expression of nervous determination. Tom, Marcus said, pointing to the gallery. Is that Emma Chun? Tom confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. My daughter. The three young people were deep in conversation, comparing notes and apparently coordinating their own strategy. Marcus realized that his children had not only found Tom's daughter, but had somehow convinced her to attend the hearing. How did they even find her? Emma Sterling knew Emma Chun from their environmental policy program. Once she understood the connection, it probably wasn't difficult to arrange a meeting. The hearing began precisely at 2 p.m. with Chairman Morrison calling the session to order. The committee members looked grim, and Marcus could sense the political tension in the room. Some representatives clearly wanted to conduct a serious investigation, while others seemed more interested in limiting the scope of inquiry. Mr. Mitchell. Chairman Morrison began. You have made some extraordinary claims about systematic corporate fraud and government corruption. Before we examine your evidence, I think it's important for the committee to understand your background and your motivations for coming forward. Tom stood and approached the witness table with quiet dignity. He had prepared for this moment. the attempt to undermine his credibility by focusing on his homeless status rather than his evidence. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Thomas Mitchell, and for the past 15 years, I have been conducting an investigation into a criminal network that has systematically destroyed American businesses while corrupting the regulatory systems designed to protect the public. Mr. Mitchell, interrupted Representative Williams, a member Marcus recognized from Robert's files. Before we discuss your investigation, shouldn't we address the fact that you have been living on the streets for over a decade? How can this committee rely on testimony from someone whose mental state is questionable? Tom had expected this attack and was ready for it. Representative Williams, my living situation is the result of the crimes I'm here to expose, not evidence of mental illness. 15 years ago, I was a successful software consultant with a wife, a daughter, and a thriving business. Robert Hayes destroyed all of that through systematic fraud, and I have spent the intervening years documenting his criminal network. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Mitchell. Do you have proof of these claims? Tom smiled slightly and gestured to the boxes of evidence that had been placed on the committee table. I have 15 years of proof, Representative Williams. Financial records, communication logs, technical documentation, and video surveillance. Everything needed to demonstrate that Robert Hayes and his associates have engaged in the largest corporate fraud scheme in American history. Chairman Morrison leaned forward with interest. Mr. Mitchell, please describe the nature of this alleged conspiracy. Tom began his testimony methodically, explaining the acquisition group's business model, their methods of infiltrating target companies, and their systematic corruption of oversight mechanisms. He presented evidence clearly and calmly, letting the facts speak for themselves. As Tom spoke, Marcus watched the committee members' reactions. Some looked skeptical, others looked concerned, and a few looked genuinely shocked by the scope of what was being revealed. But Marcus also noticed something else. In the gallery, his children and Emma-chan were taking careful notes, and Emma-chan was recording everything on her phone. Whatever they were planning, it involved documenting the entire proceeding. The hearing continued for over 2 hours, with Tom presenting evidence and answering questions with remarkable precision. Even the hostile committee members seemed impressed by the thoroughness of his documentation. Mr. Mitchell, Representative Thompson asked, if everything you're saying is true, why hasn't law enforcement acted on this information before now? Tom looked directly at Thompson, consulting a file before responding. Because law enforcement agencies have been systematically compromised through blackmail and bribery. According to the evidence I've presented, over 40 federal officials have been compromised by this network, including several individuals responsible for investigating corporate fraud. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Several committee members demanded to see the specific evidence Tom was referencing. Mr. Chairman, Tom continued, I believe this committee should be aware that 3 of its own members appear in the surveillance files maintained by Robert Hayes' network. The accusation sent shockwaves through the hearing room. Chairman Morrison called for order while several representatives demanded to know who Tom was accusing. I'm not making accusations, Tom said calmly. I'm presenting evidence. The files speak for themselves. It was at that moment that Marcus realized Tom had orchestrated something brilliant. By forcing the compromised committee members to react publicly to the evidence, he was essentially confirming their guilt in front of a national audience. The hearing continued for another hour, but the damage was done. Tom had not only presented compelling evidence of corporate fraud, but it also exposed the corruption of the very system supposed to investigate it. As the session concluded, Marcus watched his children and Emma-chan slip out of the gallery. They had witnessed everything and documented it thoroughly. Whatever they were planning next, it was going to amplify the impact of Tom's testimony far beyond the confines of the congressional hearing room. Mr. Mitchell, Chairman Morrison said in closing, "This committee will review your evidence thoroughly and will refer appropriate matters to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation." "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Tom replied. "The truth has waited 15 years to be heard. It can wait a little longer to be acted upon." As Tom gathered his materials and prepared to leave the witness table, Marcus felt a profound sense of pride. The homeless man who had walked into his office just days ago had just delivered one of the most devastating pieces of congressional testimony in recent memory. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in months, Marcus believed they might actually win. The testimony transcript would become one of the most downloaded government documents in history, but that was still hours away. As Tom stepped down from the witness table, Marcus could see the exhaustion in the older man's eyes. 15 years of preparation and investigation compressed into 3 hours of public testimony had taken its toll. "You did it," Marcus said as they walked through the Capitol building corridors. "The whole world just heard the truth about Robert's network." "The world heard allegations," Tom corrected gently. "Whether they believe those allegations and act on them remains to be seen." They were interrupted by the approach of a young woman Marcus recognized as Emma Chen. She moved with purpose through the crowd of departing observers, her phone still recording video as she approached. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion Marcus could see in her eyes. "I need to speak with you." Tom stopped walking and turned to face his daughter for the first time in 15 years. The family resemblance was unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined jawline, the same careful way of choosing words. "Emma," he said simply. "I know who you are," she said. "Emma Sterling and David Sterling found me yesterday and explained everything. About Mitchell Systems, about what Robert Hayes did to our family, about why you disappeared." Tom nodded slowly. "I didn't disappear. I was destroyed, and then I chose to stay hidden while I built a case against the people who destroyed me." Let me think you abandoned us. You let Mom think you chose your obsession over your family. I let you think that because the truth was worse. The truth was that I failed to protect you from people who targeted families as easily as they targeted businesses." Marcus watched the reunion with a mixture of fascination and heartbreak. These two people had been separated by one of the most elaborate criminal conspiracies in modern history, and now they were meeting as strangers who happened to share DNA and trauma. "Mr. Mitchell," Emma began. "Tom," he said quietly. "You can call me Tom." "Tom, the work you've done, the evidence you've presented, it's going to change everything. Not just for TechNova, but for every company and every family that Robert Hayes has destroyed." Emma pulled out her phone and showed them a social media feed that was exploding with activity. Videos from the congressional hearing were being shared thousands of times per minute, along with commentary, analysis, and supporting evidence from other victims of similar schemes. "Your testimony went viral within 30 minutes, Emma explained. "But more importantly, it's inspiring other people to come forward with their own evidence. The hashtag acquisition group is trending worldwide." Tom took Emma's phone and scrolled through dozens of posts from people sharing their experiences with suspicious business collapses, regulatory failures, and financial manipulations that followed patterns similar to what he had described. "This is what I hoped would happen," Tom said. "One voice can be discredited, but a chorus of voices is much harder to ignore." Marcus's phone buzzed with a call from Sarah. He answered it immediately. "Marcus, you need to see the news. Every major network is covering Tom's testimony, and they're all demanding responses from Robert Hayes and the other people named in the evidence." "Where is Robert?" "That's the interesting part. He's disappeared. His office is empty. His house appears to be abandoned, and his phone goes straight to voicemail. It's like he vanished the moment Tom started testifying." Marcus felt a chill, or he's preparing a counterattack. That's what I'm afraid of. Marcus, be careful. If everything Tom said is true, then these people have enormous resources and no ethical constraints. Emma-chan had been listening to the conversation. When Marcus ended the call, she looked at him with an expression of determined resolve that reminded him powerfully of her father. "There's something else," she said. "Something that might help protect all of us while ensuring that the truth gets out." She showed them a text message on her phone from someone identified only as WP Contact. "Have reviewed the hearing footage and supporting documentation. This story meets our standards for immediate publication. Can you provide additional sources for corroboration?" "Washington Post," Emma explained. "I've been in contact with an investigative journalist who specializes in corporate corruption. She's been tracking similar patterns for months, but she needed a breakthrough source to make the story publishable." "You gave them Tom's evidence?" Marcus asked. "I gave them publicly available information from the congressional hearing, plus some additional research I've been conducting on corporate bankruptcy patterns. But I told them that the real sources would need to speak directly to journalists." Tom considered this development carefully. Working with established media outlets provides some protection, but it also creates new vulnerabilities. These people have demonstrated their ability to manipulate news coverage and silence journalists, which is why we need multiple outlets in multiple countries, Emma said. "I've also been in contact with journalists in the UK, Canada, Germany, and Japan. If they try to suppress the story in one place, it will still break everywhere else." Marcus looked at Tom's daughter with amazement. In less than 24 hours, she had built an international media strategy that rivaled anything TechNova's public relations team had ever developed. "How did you learn to do this?" "Social work," Emma said simply. "When you're trying to help vulnerable populations, you learn that individual voices get ignored, but coordinated advocacy gets results. Same principle applies to exposing corporate crime." Tom's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it quickly. Then his expression darkened. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "My source at the FBI. They're being pressured to treat our evidence as unreliable intelligence from a compromised source. Someone is working very hard to prevent a criminal investigation." "Who?" "Deputy Director Harrison. According to this message, he's arguing that my homeless status and obvious bias make me an unreliable witness, and that congressional testimony, without corroborating evidence, isn't sufficient to justify a full investigation." Emma looked up from her phone. "Deputy Director Harrison was mentioned in your surveillance files, wasn't he? Page 847 of the government corruption documentation. Harrison has been feeding information to Robert's network for at least 3 years." Marcus felt the familiar sense of walls closing in that had plagued him throughout this entire ordeal. Every time they thought they'd found a path to justice, another obstacle appeared. "So what now?" Marcus asked. "If the FBI won't investigate and half of Congress is compromised, how do we actually stop these people?" "By making it impossible for them to operate in secret anymore," Emma said. "Look at this." She showed them her social media feeds, which were now flowing with posts from around the world. Victims of similar schemes were sharing their stories. Journalists were requesting interviews, and activists were organizing protests outside the offices of companies connected to the acquisition group. "Your testimony didn't just expose one conspiracy," Emma told her father. "It exposed a pattern that people are recognizing everywhere. Stock manipulations, regulatory capture, orchestrated bankruptcies. It's happening in dozens of countries." Tom studied the global response with the tactical mind that had served him in military intelligence. This could work. Instead of relying on compromised institutions to investigate the conspiracy, we're creating public pressure that makes those institutions irrelevant. Exactly. If enough people understand how the scam works, it becomes much harder to execute. Companies will be more careful about outside consultants. Investors will be more skeptical of coordinated trading patterns, and regulators will face public pressure to actually regulate. Marcus's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Sterling? This is Agent Jennifer Walsh with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. I'm calling about the congressional testimony given earlier today. Marcus looked at Tom, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, Agent Walsh. How can I help you? I'd like to meet with you and Mr. Mitchell to discuss the evidence he presented. Specifically, I'm interested in the files related to government corruption and regulatory capture. Agent Walsh, we've been told that the FBI isn't treating our evidence as credible. Sir, the FBI is a large organization with many different divisions and many different perspectives. Deputy Director Harrison speaks for some parts of the Bureau, but not for all of us. There are agents who want to pursue this investigation regardless of political pressure. Tom took the phone from Marcus. Agent Walsh, this is Tom Mitchell. Before we meet, I need to verify that you're not in Robert Hayes' surveillance files. Mr. Mitchell, I can assure you that I've never had any contact with Robert Hayes or his associates. In fact, I've been investigating similar patterns of corporate manipulation for the past 2 years. Your testimony provided missing pieces that I've been looking for. Tom consulted his secure phone, apparently cross-referencing Agent Walsh's name against their evidence files. She's clean, he told Marcus. No mentions in any of the surveillance reports. Agent Walsh, Tom said into the phone, we'd be happy to meet with you. But I need to warn you that this investigation has already cost several people their careers and possibly their lives. Are you prepared for that level of opposition? Mr. Mitchell, I've been a federal agent for 12 years. I knew what I took. This job that some investigations would be dangerous. But I also knew that some investigations would be necessary. This appears to be both. They arranged to meet Agent Walsh the following morning at a secure location she would provide. After ending the call, Tom looked more hopeful than Marcus had seen him since this entire ordeal began. Having clean FBI support changes everything, Tom said. Even if the Bureau's leadership is compromised, honest agents can still pursue parallel investigations and build criminal cases. Emma Chun had been following the conversation with interest. There's something else. I've been analyzing the financial patterns you documented, and I think I know why Robert Hayes disappeared so quickly after your testimony. She pulled up a series of charts on her laptop showing stock prices, trading volumes, and option positions for companies connected to the acquisition group. Look at this trading activity from this morning, right after your testimony concluded. Massive sell orders, coordinated across multiple markets, all designed to minimize losses from positions that were about to become worthless. Tom studied the data. They're liquidating their holdings, not just liquidating fleeing. These trades suggest they're converting everything to cash and probably moving it offshore. This isn't a tactical retreat. It's a strategic evacuation. Marcus realized what Emma was suggesting. They know the conspiracy is blown. They're not planning to fight the investigation. They're planning to disappear with whatever money they can salvage. Which means we have a narrow window to freeze their assets before they can transfer everything beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. Tom said. Emma was already typing on her laptop. I'm sending this analysis to the journalists I've been working with, plus Agent Walsh's contact information. If the FBI can get emergency asset seizure orders, they'll need evidence of imminent flight risk, Tom interrupted, which we can provide through the trading data you just analyzed. Marcus watched his former Tormund's daughter and his new ally coordinate their response with the efficiency of a military operation. In less than 4 hours, they had gone from giving congressional testimony to orchestrating an international manhunt for the people who had destroyed their families. Tom, Marcus said, I think your 15 years of preparation are about to pay off. We'll see. But for the first time since this whole thing started, I think we might actually be ahead of them instead of behind them." Emma closed her laptop and looked at both men with an expression that mixed determination with something that might have been hope. "Mr. Sterling, Tom, I think we're about to find out whether justice still exists in this country." The new partnership agreement was more than a legal document. It was a declaration of principles. Sterling Mitchell Technologies would operate according to strict ethical guidelines, transparent business practices, and a commitment to using technology for social benefit rather than exploitation. As Marcus signed his name beside Tom's on the final page, he felt like he was reclaiming not just his company, but his integrity. "Equal partners," Tom said, extending his hand to Marcus. 50-50 ownership, shared decision-making, and a charter. That prevents either of us from compromising our principles for profit. "Equal partners," Marcus agreed, shaking hands with the man who had saved his life's work. They were meeting in Agent Walsh's FBI field office, surrounded by evidence boxes and arrest warrants that represented the culmination of their investigation. In the 72 hours since Tom's congressional testimony, the acquisition group conspiracy had unraveled with remarkable speed. "Gentlemen," Agent Walsh said, entering the conference room with a thick folder of documents, "I have some updates on our investigations that I think you'll find interesting." She spread out a series of arrest photos on the table. Marcus recognized several faces: Robert Hayes, Deputy Director Harrison, 3 members of Congress, and a dozen other individuals who had appeared in Tom's surveillance files. Robert Hayes was arrested this morning at Dulles Airport, attempting to board a private flight to the Cayman Islands. He was carrying approximately $12 million in cash and bearer bonds, plus encrypted drives containing what appears to be backup copies of the surveillance data you provided. "He kept copies?" Tom asked. "Insurance, most likely, or leverage for plea negotiations. Either way, it confirms the authenticity of your evidence and provides additional material for prosecution." Agent Walsh turned to another set of documents. "The asset seizure operations have recovered over $2 billion in liquid assets and frozen another $8 billion in various investment vehicles. We estimate that represents about 60% of the group's total holdings." Marcus studied the financial reports with amazement. They stole enough money to fund a small country. Actually, they stole enough money to influence several small countries. Part of what we've uncovered is an international network of shell companies, offshore banks, and corrupted officials that spans dozens of jurisdictions. Agent Walsh opened her laptop and displayed a network diagram that looked remarkably similar to the ones Tom had created, but far more detailed and comprehensive. "Your investigation provided the foundation, but now we have cooperation from law enforcement agencies in 15 different countries. This has become the largest coordinated financial crime investigation in history." Tom leaned back in his chair, looking simultaneously exhausted and vindicated. 15 years of work, and it all comes together in less than a week. "That's the thing about exponential systems," Agent Walsh observed. "They seem stable right up until the moment they collapse completely." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Emma Sterling. "Turn on Channel 7 News. Emergency broadcast." "Agent." Walsh switched on the conference room television, tuning to the local news station. The screen showed a breaking news banner and a somber-looking anchor. "We're receiving reports of arrests across multiple federal agencies, including the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Justice. Sources tell us this is connected to the corporate corruption scandal exposed in yesterday's congressional testimony." The broadcast switched to footage of handcuffed officials being led from government buildings, accompanied by commentary from legal experts about the scope and implications of the investigation. "This is unprecedented," the anchor continued. "Where?" looking at what appears to be systematic corruption of multiple regulatory agencies by a coordinated criminal network. Agent Walsh muted the television. Public awareness is our best protection now. The more people understand how the scam worked, the harder it becomes for similar operations to function in the future. Tom was reading through the arrest reports with professional interest. What about the international aspects? The conspirators who are outside U.S. jurisdiction. That's where things get interesting. The evidence you provided has triggered investigations in multiple countries. And it turns out the acquisition group was operating similar schemes worldwide. The UK authorities arrested 6 individuals this morning. The Germans have issued warrants for another 12. And the Japanese are investigating coordinated market manipulations dating back over a decade. Marcus realized they were witnessing something historic, not just the exposure of a criminal conspiracy, but the coordinated international response to transnational financial crime. Agent Walsh, what happens to the companies that were destroyed? The employees who lost their jobs, the investors who lost their savings. That's where your new partnership becomes relevant. The recovered assets will be distributed to victims through a restitution process. But there's also talk of using some of the money to fund technology development that serves public interests rather than private exploitation. Tom looked up from the arrest reports. A trust fund for ethical innovation? Something like that. The details are still being worked out. But the concept is to create sustainable funding for the kind of work you're planning to do with Sterling Mitchell Technologies. Marcus felt a surge of excitement. Instead of just rebuilding TechNova, they could create something entirely new, a technology company that was funded by the recovery of stolen assets and dedicated to preventing the kind of exploitation they had just exposed. There's one more thing, Agent Walsh said, pulling out a final document. We've received a request from the Congressional Committee for both of you to testify again next week. This time, not as witnesses to crimes, but as expert advisors on how to prevent similar conspiracies in the future. Tom smiled. From homeless vagrant to expert advisor in 4 days. Only in America. Tom, Marcus said, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. But what happens now? Do you want to continue working in technology, or I want to continue working with you? Tom interrupted. Not because I need the job, but because I believe in what we can build together. Your business experience, plus my technical skills, plus both of our understanding of how these systems can be corrupted, we could create something truly beneficial. Agent Walsh gathered her documents and prepared to leave them alone to discuss their plans. Gentlemen, I want you to know that your investigation has prevented enormous additional harm. The evidence suggests the acquisition group was planning to manipulate critical infrastructure sectors' power grids, water systems, communication networks. If they had succeeded, the damage would have been catastrophic. After Agent Walsh left, Marcus and Tom sat quietly for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what they were planning next. Tom, Marcus said finally, I need to ask you something personal. What do you want to happen with Emma? Your daughter? Tom was quiet for a long moment. I want her to have the choice. Now that the truth is out, she can decide whether she wants a relationship with her father, but I won't pressure her. She's built a good life, despite my absence, and I won't disrupt that unless she wants me to be part of it. And if she does want a relationship, then I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to be the father she deserved 15 years ago. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma Chun's number. Mr. Sterling? This is Emma. I'm calling to ask if you and Tom would like to have dinner tonight. I've been talking with my mother, and we'd like to hear the whole story directly from Tom, if he's willing to share it. Marcus looked at Tom, who was listening to the conversation with an expression of cautious hope. Emma, Marcus said, I think Tom would very much like that opportunity. Good. We're making dinner at Mom's house. 7 o'clock. And Mr. Sterling? Thank you for giving my father a chance to tell his story. It means more than you know. After ending the call, Tom stared at his phone for several minutes without speaking. 15 years, he said finally. 15 years of believing I'd lost my family forever. You didn't lose them, Marcus said. You protected them, and now you get them back. Tom stood up and gathered the partnership documents they had signed. Marcus, I have one last question for you. Are you absolutely certain you want to be partners with a formerly homeless man who has spent 15 years obsessed with revenge? Marcus thought about everything that had happened over the past week. The discovery of systematic fraud, the exposure of government corruption, the international manhunt for financial criminals, and the opportunity to rebuild his company according to principles rather than profits. Tom, he said, I can't think of anyone I'd rather be partners with. The bronze nameplate gleamed in the morning sunlight streaming through the windows of their new office space. Sterling Mitchell Technologies, innovation with integrity, wasn't just a company name. It was a mission statement that would guide every decision they made going forward. 6 months had passed since Tom's congressional testimony, and the transformation had been remarkable. The acquisition group conspiracy trials were proceeding through federal courts with convictions mounting daily. Robert Hayes had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, along with asset forfeiture that would fund victim restitution. For decades, the international investigations had yielded similar results, with over 200 arrests across 15 countries. But the real changes were more personal and more profound. Tom Mitchell no longer lived under a bridge. The modest apartment he'd rented was Spartan by most standards, but it represented a return to dignity that he'd almost forgotten was possible. More importantly, it had a second bedroom where his daughter Emma could stay when she visited, which was happening with increasing frequency. Dad, Emma said, looking up from the laptop where she was reviewing their latest project proposal, I think you're going to like this one. The relationship between Tom and his daughter had developed slowly, carefully, with the patience of two people who understood that trust could be rebuilt but not rushed. Emma had taken a leave of absence from her social work job to help establish Sterling Mitchell Technologies, bringing her expertise in community advocacy to their technology development process. Marcus entered the conference room carrying coffee for the team, followed by Sarah Chun, who had enthusiastically accepted the position of Chief Operating Officer. Sarah's experience managing crisis communications had proven invaluable as they navigated the media attention that continued to surround their story. Morning briefing, Sarah announced, settling into her chair with the authority of someone who'd learned to thrive under pressure. We have 14 interview requests from technology journalists, 3 documentary proposals, and 2 book publishers interested in Tom's story. And the real work? Marcus asked. 3 new client contracts, all from companies that want to implement the kind of ethical technology frameworks we've developed. Plus a grant proposal from the National Science Foundation for our surveillance detection algorithms. The algorithms Tom had developed during his years of tracking Robert's network had applications far beyond exposing corporate conspiracies. Their pattern recognition software could identify market manipulation, detect coordinated disinformation campaigns, and expose hidden networks of influence that threaten democratic institutions. There's something else, Emma said, pulling up a news article on her laptop. The European Union announced a new regulatory framework for corporate surveillance and data privacy. They specifically cited Tom's congressional testimony as evidence of why stronger protections are needed. Tom read through the article with quiet satisfaction. Policy changes. That's how you know the investigation actually mattered. Marcus reviewed their project calendar, marveling at how different this felt from running TechNova. Instead of chasing profits and market share, they were focused on building technology that served public interests while remaining financially sustainable. The Homeless Services Project is launching next week, Marcus noted. Emma, are you ready for the field testing? Emma Chun had proposed developing a comprehensive information system for homeless service providers, a secure platform that could help coordinate care, track outcomes, and identify systemic barriers to housing and employment. It was exactly the kind of project that combined technical innovation with social impact. I've been working with shelters in 3 cities to refine the user interface, Emma replied. The social workers love it because it actually makes their jobs easier instead of more complicated. The project had personal significance for Tom, who understood from experience how difficult it was to navigate social services systems while dealing with the daily challenges of homelessness. Tom, Sarah said, there's a call scheduled for this afternoon with the FBI task force. They want your input on the new financial crimes detection protocols. Tom had become an unofficial advisor to multiple government agencies, helping them understand how sophisticated criminal networks operated and how to detect similar conspiracies before they could cause widespread damage. Any word on the final asset recovery numbers? Marcus asked. Agent Walsh sent an update yesterday. Total recovery is now over $15 billion, with distribution to victims proceeding ahead of schedule. She also mentioned that your victim impact statements were instrumental in securing maximum sentences for the primary defendants. The money couldn't undo the damage that had been done, families destroyed, careers ruined, innovation suppressed, but it could provide some measure of justice and help prevent similar crimes in the future. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Emma Sterling, who was now a graduate student at Georgetown studying technology policy. Saw the EU announcement. Dad, you're changing the world. The relationship with his children had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty about both his failures and his efforts to make amends. They understood that he'd made mistakes in running TechNova, but they also understood that he'd risked everything to expose the truth and hold criminals accountable. Speaking of changing the world, Sarah said, we should discuss the conference. Invitation from MAT. They want Tom to deliver the keynote address at their symposium on technology ethics. Tom looked uncomfortable with the attention, as he always did. Despite becoming something of a public figure, he remained more interested in the work than in recognition for the work. What's the audience? Tom asked. Computer science students, faculty, and industry professionals. About 2,000 people. What would I talk about? Emma Chun looked up from her laptop with a smile. How about the power of persistence? Or the importance of ethical principles in technical work? Or maybe just tell them your story, how one person with determination and patience can expose even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies. Tom considered this suggestion. I suppose there might be value in that. Help people understand that individual actions can have systemic impact. Marcus watched the interaction between Tom and his daughter with deep satisfaction. The reunion had been gradual and sometimes difficult, but it was clearly healing wounds that had festered for 15 years. There's one more agenda item, Sarah said. The documentary team wants to film the grand opening ceremony next week. They're particularly interested in the symbolic significance of the location Sterling Mitchell Technologies had chosen to establish their headquarters in a renovated homeless shelter, transforming a symbol of social failure into a center of innovation and hope. The building's history served as a constant reminder of their mission to use technology for social benefit rather than private exploitation. Are we ready for that level of public attention? Marcus asked. I think we have to be, Tom replied. Part of our responsibility is to demonstrate that ethical technology development is not only possible, but profitable. If we hide our success, we're not helping other entrepreneurs make better choices. The morning briefing concluded with assignments for the week ahead: client meetings, project reviews, media interviews, and the ongoing work of building a technology company that prioritized human welfare alongside financial sustainability. As the team dispersed to their various tasks, Marcus found himself alone with Tom in the conference room. The older man was studying the bronze nameplate with an expression of quiet contentment. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. "About the 15 years? About the homelessness? About missing my daughter's childhood?" Tom paused thoughtfully. "I regret that. It was necessary. But I don't regret doing it. If I hadn't documented Robert's crimes, if I hadn't been patient enough to build an airtight case, how many more companies would have been destroyed? How many more families would have suffered?" Tom turned away from the nameplate to face Marcus directly. "What about you? Any regrets about giving up the executive lifestyle to become partners with a formerly homeless conspiracy theorist?" Marcus thought about his old office in the TechNova building, with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows and view of the city skyline. He thought about the private jets, the exclusive restaurants, the board meetings where millions of dollars were discussed as casually as lunch orders. Then he looked around their current conference room, with its refurbished furniture and inspirational posters and whiteboards, covered with diagrams for projects that would help vulnerable populations access technology, healthcare, and economic opportunities. "No regrets," Marcus said. "This feels like the company I thought I was building 30 years ago, before I lost track of why I was building it." Tom smiled and gathered his materials for the next meeting. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We're just getting started. All the work we've done so far, exposing the conspiracy, rebuilding the company, establishing ethical principles, that was just clearing the ground. Now we get to build something that actually makes the world better." Marcus watched Tom leave the conference room and head toward his next appointment with the determination of someone who had learned that justice was possible but required sustained effort to achieve. Outside the windows, the city continued its daily rhythm of commerce and competition, ambition and innovation. But inside Sterling Mitchell Technologies, a different kind of business was taking shape, one that proved profit and principles could coexist, one that demonstrated how individual courage could challenge systemic corruption, and one that offered hope that technology could serve humanity rather than exploit it. The bronze nameplate caught the afternoon light as Marcus prepared for his own next meeting. Innovation with integrity. It wasn't just a company motto. It was a promise to everyone whose trust had been betrayed by corporate greed, everyone whose dreams had been destroyed by systematic fraud, and everyone who still believed that business could be a force for good in the world. Sometimes salvation really did come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes the people who had lost everything were the ones best equipped to help others find what they needed most.